The last thing Owen Keller expected that rainy Tuesday night was to be running into a burning building, with his 6-year-old daughter screaming after him from the sidewalk. "Daddy, don't go," Grace cried, her tiny fists pounding against the straps of her backpack as she stood in her polka-dot raincoat, soaked and shaking. Owen turned back for half a second, meeting her terrified eyes. "Stay right there, baby. I'll be right back. I promise." Then he was gone, sprinting across the street and into the inferno. He didn't think, he just moved. Instinct. The flames licked through the windows of the second story, smoke pouring into the night air. A woman's voice had screamed from inside only moments before. No one else had stopped. Owen didn't have much a second-hand Toyota, a beat-up one-bedroom apartment in Queens, and a job at the auto shop that barely paid enough to keep the lights on. But he had a kid who looked at him like he was the entire world, and that meant when you saw someone in trouble, you acted. Period. The door was hot but not locked. Smoke filled his lungs instantly. He pulled his hoodie over his nose and ran toward the stairs, dodging falling debris. He could hear coughing, a woman's voice. "Help, somebody." "I'm coming," he shouted, following the sound to a hall filled with smoke. He kicked open the door to a corner office, where a woman was wedged against the wall, her ankle pinned under a beam. Her eyes lifted to him, wild and desperate. "Can't move." Owen bent down, grabbed the beam with both hands, and lifted with everything he had. It shifted just enough. "Now," he barked. She crawled out, coughing violently. He scooped her up without hesitation, ignoring the way her nails dug into his shoulder. "Hold on to me," he said, running back through the hallway. The ceiling cracked behind them. They made it out with seconds to spare. He burst through the front entrance as the upper floor exploded behind them in a roaring blast of heat. Sirens were finally coming down the block. Grace launched herself at his legs as he dropped to the pavement, coughing hard with the woman still in his arms. "Oh my God," the woman gasped, staring at him. You just..." "You okay?" Owen rasped, ignoring the pain in his ribs. She nodded slowly. "I think so, my ankle's twisted, but you saved my life." He managed a short, dry cough laugh. "Wasn't gonna leave you in there." The paramedics took her. The firefighters surrounded the building. Owen sat on the curb, soaked and shaking, holding Grace close. He didn't know her name. He didn't ask. He didn't need to. He wasn't a hero. He was just a dad who did what he had to. 3 weeks later, Owen was under a car changing a busted exhaust pipe when someone knocked on the garage's metal frame. "Hey, Keller," his boss called. "Someone here to see you." Owen wiped his hands and slid out from under the car, already bracing for a customer complaint or another bounce check. What he didn't expect was the woman from the fire standing in the doorway this time in heels, a tailored white coat, and a sleek black car parked behind her. Her long dark hair was pulled into a low ponytail, sunglasses pushed up on her head. It took him a second to recognize her, but when he did, he straightened, wiping the sweat from his brow. "You." She smiled. "Hi, I'm Madelyn Lane." He blinked. "You, okay, after everything?" "I'm fine, thanks to you." She hesitated, stepping closer. "I wanted to thank you properly. I've been looking for you for weeks." "You didn't have to," he said, glancing down at his stained t-shirt. "I'm just glad you made it out." "I think you're underselling what you did." Her voice was soft, but there was something commanding underneath it. "You ran into a burning building for a total stranger. That's not nothing." He shrugged, felt like the right thing. Madelyn looked around the garage, then back at him. "Can I take you and your daughter to dinner, as a thank you?" Owen hesitated. "That's kind, but we're not really fancy dinner people." "I'm not talking about fancy," she said. "Just a meal, my treat." Grace peeked out from behind the car lift. "Is that the fire lady?" Madelyn grinned. That would be me. Owen sighed. You don't have to do this. I want to, she said simply. Please. The restaurant was fancier than Owen expected. White tablecloths, candlelight, a violinist near the bar. Owen tugged at the collar of his one good button-up shirt while Grace practically bounced in her seat, eyes wide at the bread basket. You ever eat somewhere like this? Madelyn asked her. Nope, Grace said proudly. Daddy makes pancakes for dinner sometimes, though. Madelyn smiled. That sounds delicious. Owen cleared his throat. So, what do you do exactly when you're not escaping fires? She took a sip of wine. I run Lane and Row. His fork paused halfway to his mouth. The marketing firm. The one with the building that caught fire, she said, amused. Yes. He blinked. You're the CEO. That's me. Owen choked on his water. Grace patted his back like a pro. I didn't realize you were. A rich woman in heels, she teased. He rubbed the back of his neck. I was gonna say important. Madelyn's smile softened. You didn't ask. I liked that. They talked through dinner. About life, about Grace, about how he'd raised her alone since his ex left when Grace was a baby. About how Madelyn had built her business from scratch after her father passed, how she'd worked her way up in a man's world with no shortcuts. By the end of the night, Grace was leaning against Owen's shoulder, half asleep. I had a great time, Madelyn said as she walked them to their car. Thanks for dinner, that was more than I expected. I meant it when I said I wanted to thank you. He nodded. Well, consider me thanked. She paused. Would you want to do this again? Just you and me, maybe. Owen looked at her, really looked. She was beautiful, sharp, confident, way out of his league, but she was looking at him like he mattered. And for the first time in years, something in his chest shifted. Yeah, he said, I'd like that. Owen wasn't sure when a casual dinner thank you turned into this a standing date every Friday night, always in unexpected places. One week it was a jazz club tucked into a Harlem basement, the next a rooftop sushi bar with a skyline view that made his stomach twist with nerves just walking in. But Madelyn never made him feel like he didn't belong. She never looked at his jeans or his worn leather jacket like they were out of place. If anything, she looked at him like she was trying not. Tonight, she brought him to an art gallery opening in Soho filled with sculpted glass, whispered critiques, and men in silk scarves sipping champagne. Owen hovered near a minimalist painting that looked like someone had thrown red paint in a fit of rage and called it a masterpiece. Is this one supposed to be angry? He muttered. Madelyn laughed beside him, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. I think it's called yearning. He raised an eyebrow. Yearning for what exactly? A refund. She nudged him with her elbow. Don't be cynical. Art's about interpretation. I interpret this as a 5-year-old with a paint roller. She tilted her head, amused. You're not intimidated by any of this, are you? Not intimidated, he said, glancing around at the crowd. Just wondering how long have to stand here before someone asks me for directions to the parking garage. Madelyn grinned. Let them, like having you here. He looked at her then, really looked. The way she moved through the room elegant, self-assured, greeting curators and collectors with ease she belonged in this world. She didn't apologize for it. But she was also the same woman who'd sat cross-legged on the floor of his apartment last week, helping Grace glue glitter onto a school project with the same focus she probably gave her quarterly budgets. Do you come to things like this often? He asked. I used to, she said, taking a sip of wine. Before everything became about work. It's easy to forget what you enjoy when you're always chasing the next goal. He nodded slowly. So why this tonight? Because wanted to know what it would be like seeing it through your eyes. He wasn't sure how to respond to that. There was something in her tone curiosity layered with vulnerability that caught him off guard. Before he could reply, a tall man in a gray blazer approached, his smile practiced and a little too bright. "Madelyn," he said smoothly, "didn't expect to see you here tonight." "Hi, Bryce," she said, her posture stiffening almost imperceptibly. Bryce's eyes flicked to Owen, taking in the calloused hands, the boots, the faint scent of engine oil that clung to his clothes no matter how hard he scrubbed. He smiled like someone who'd already decided what he saw. "And you are?" "Owen Keller." Bryce extended a hand. "Bryce Langford. I used to work with Madelyn. Some of us still remember the early days." Madelyn's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Bryce was an assistant in our first office." "A memorable era," Bryce said, turning back to Owen. "So, what do you do?" "I'm a mechanic," Owen said evenly. Bryce's eyebrows lifted just slightly. "Ah, that's practical." Madelyn always did appreciate the grounded types. Owen gave him a tight smile. "Keeps the wheels turning." Madelyn slipped her hand through Owen's arm. "We were just leaving." They stepped outside into the cooler night air, the city humming around them. She didn't say anything at first, just walked beside him in silence. "Was he always that charming?" Owen asked finally. Madelyn exhaled. "He was harmless when he was filing invoices. Then he married an investor's daughter and developed an ego." "Did you too?" "No," she said quickly. "He wanted more than he earned. That's never impressed me." They reached her car sleek, black, and probably worth more than everything Owen owned combined. She paused by the passenger door and looked at him. "Does any of this bother you?" she asked quietly. "What, the art scene, pretentious ex-colleagues, fancy cars?" She waited. Owen leaned against the car door. "I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel like I'm walking around in someone else's shoes sometimes. But you don't make me feel small. That's what matters." Her shoulders relaxed. "You have no idea how rare that is." They drove in silence for a while, the city lights blurring past the windows. When she pulled up outside his apartment, Owen hesitated. "Wanna come in?" he asked. "Grace is at her friend's for a sleepover. It's just me, and leftover lasagna." Madelyn smiled. Lasagna and a mechanic sounds like a perfect Friday night. Inside, the apartment was small but tidy. She toed off her heels at the door and wandered to the window, looking out over the street below. Owen poured 2 glasses of water and handed her one. "You ever miss normal?" he asked. She turned toward him. "What's normal?" "Not being scheduled within an inch of your life. Not needing a driver or a tailor or 5 people to answer your phone." She considered. "I miss time, real time, without noise. I miss dinners that don't involve networking." "This isn't networking," he said. She stepped closer, her voice lower now. "No, this is the first night in months I've felt like it could just be." He didn't know what came over him, then maybe it was the way her eyes searched his face, or the tremble in her breath, but he leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't desperate. It was certain. When they parted, she rested her forehead against his. "I wasn't planning on all this." "Me either. I'm scared of what it means." "So am I. But I still want to see where it goes." He nodded. "Then let's not overthink it, one Friday at a time." She stayed the night. She didn't bring a change of clothes. She didn't care. In the morning, she helped him make pancakes. She burned the first batch. He didn't mind. They sat by the window with coffee, watching the city wake up. And for the first time in a long time, Owen didn't feel like the underdog in someone else's story. He felt like he belonged in his own. A knock startled Owen just as he was dragging a laundry basket down the hall. He nudged it aside with his foot and opened the door, only to freeze. Two men in charcoal suits stood on the stoop. Behind them, a black sedan idled by the curb. "Mr. Keller," the taller one asked. "Yahe." One of them held up a small leather folder. "We're with Lane and Rowe, MS. Lane asked us to deliver something personally." Owen's stomach tightened. "Is she all right?" "She's fine, sir. This is just a delivery." Owen eyed them warily, then took the envelope. The sedan pulled away before he even shut the door. Inside, the envelope was thick, not paper, cardstock. He pulled out a single, embossed invitation. "What the hell?" The lettering was gold-foiled, the kind of thing you'd expect for royalty. At the top, in elegant script, "Lane and Rowe Annual Winter Gala." Below, formal attire required. Guest of honor, Owen Keller. He stared at it for a long time before Grace came padding into the room in socks and a t-shirt that said, "Future Astronaut." "Dad, why are you making that face?" He held up the invite. "Apparently, I'm a guest of honor." Her eyes went wide. "Is that like, famous?" "Something like that." Owen hadn't heard from Madelyn since she left his place 3 nights ago. No texts, no calls. He figured maybe she was giving them space, or maybe she was rethinking everything. He couldn't blame her. But this. Grace plopped onto the couch and examined the card. "There's glitter on the letters. That means it's serious." He sat down beside her. "Do you think she's trying to say something?" "I think she wants you to wear a tie." That night, Owen stood in front of the mirror, the tie in question hanging from his fingers like a puzzle piece with no instructions. Grace sat on the edge of the bed with a YouTube tutorial pulled up. "It goes over, under through, then around again." "You sure?" "Dad, I'm 6. I know everything." He followed her directions. It came out lopsided, but better than his last attempt, which had involved duct tape. When he arrived at the ballroom, he almost turned back. The building was limestone and glass, lit with golden sconces and lined with valise. Inside, the marble floors gleamed beneath chandeliers like something out of a palace. Owen felt his boots sink into the plush carpet and considered pretending he was lost. But then he saw her. Madelyn stood at the top of the grand staircase in a black velvet gown that hugged her frame and fell in soft waves to the floor. Her hair was swept into an elegant twist, a single sapphire pendant resting just above her collarbone. She wasn't smiling for the cameras or the guests, not until she saw him. Then everything changed. She came down the stairs slowly, her heels silent on the marble. Owen met her halfway without thinking. "You clean up well," she said, her voice lower than usual. "You look like you walked out of a magazine." She tilted her head. "You're early." "I figured if I hesitated, I wouldn't come at all." Her hand brushed his arm. "I'm glad you did." They entered together. The crowd parted, murmurs following them like shadows. Waiters offered champagne on silver trays. An orchestra played something slow and expensive. Owen had never felt more out of place in his life. But Madelyn never let go of his hand. She guided him through the room with the ease of someone used to being watched, introduced him to partners, artists, investors, people who gave him polite nods and curious glances. He smiled when necessary, said little, and kept his eyes on her. Later, when the speeches began, she took the stage. "Thank you all for joining us tonight," she began, her voice steady and clear. "When we started Lane and Rowe, we had no office, no staff, and no certainty anything we built would last. We just had vision and the courage to follow it." Owen watched from the back of the ballroom, unsure what she was building to. "But sometimes," she continued, "the most important people in your story aren't the ones who sign the checks or run the meetings. Sometimes they're the ones who show up when no one else does. who run into fire without expecting anything in return. She looked directly at him. I owe my life to someone who didn't know my name, and now, I don't want to imagine my life without him in it. A hush fell over the room. Madelyn stepped down off the stage and walked straight to him. She didn't care who was watching. She didn't lower her voice. I haven't been able to stop thinking about you, she said. Every day, every night, and I don't want to pretend anymore. And Madelyn, I know this is a lot. I know I live in a world that doesn't look like yours, but I've never felt more like myself than I do when I'm with you. He swallowed hard. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. He didn't kiss her, not yet, but he took her hand and held it like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. After the gala, she didn't go back to her penthouse. She came home with him. They didn't talk about what it meant. They didn't dissect it. She curled up on his couch with her shoes kicked off and her head on his chest. And when Grace burst through the door the next morning, backpack swinging and cheeks pink from the cold, she grinned and shouted, "Did you two get married while I was at Grandma's?" Madelyn laughed, "Not yet." Grace narrowed her eyes. "You better not do it without me." Owen raised an eyebrow. "You're already planning the wedding." "I've got ideas," she said, pulling out a crumpled notebook. "Also, I want a chocolate fountain and a pony, but just for the photos." Madelyn looked at Owen, eyes shining. "You okay with all that?" "I'll start saving for the pony." Later that week, Owen was back at the shop, tightening bolts under a lifted Mustang when one of the guys approached him. "Someone's here asking for you," he said. "Looks like a lawyer." Owen wiped his hands and stepped outside. The man stood beside a glossy black car, briefcase in hand. "Mr. Keller, I represent Madelyn Lane's legal team. She asked me to deliver this." He handed over a folder. Owen opened it. Inside was a contract and a check. He stared at the number, then stared harder. "Is this a joke?" "No, sir," the man said. "MS. Lane is offering you a controlling partnership in a new auto service initiative she's launching under Lane and Rowe. Full branding, funding, and operational independence. She says you saved her life. She wants to help build yours." Owen closed the folder. "You can tell her I don't need charity." The man didn't flinch. "She said you'd say that. She also said to remind you this isn't a favor. It's a partnership. She believes in you, you should too." He walked back into the shop without answering. That night, he sat across from Madelyn at his kitchen table, the folder between them. "You really want to do this?" "I don't offer things I don't mean," she said. "This isn't just about the fire, it's about you. You have talent, you have vision. You've done everything alone for years, but you don't have to anymore." He looked at her, heart pounding. "I'm not used to people betting on me." "I'm not betting, I'm investing in you, in us, and I don't expect a return, just trust." He exhaled slowly. "Then let's build something together." Owen stood at the edge of the unfinished garage, his boots crunching over gravel and sawdust as the morning sun lit the steel beams stretching over his head. The scent of fresh lumber mixed with the faint echo of drills and hammers, but it wasn't the noise that made his chest tighten, it was the quiet pride in knowing this place would soon carry his name. Not Lane and Rowe, not some faceless sponsor's logo. Just Keller Automotive, backed, yes, but built by him. And it was happening because she believed in him. He looked over his shoulder to where Grace was walking along a cinder block ledge with her arms out like airplane wings, her backpack sliding off one shoulder. A construction foreman stood nearby, watching her with an easy grin, but Owen didn't miss the way Madelyn's eyes tracked his daughter every second. She stood near the blueprints with a folded blazer in her arms, her heels replaced with worn sneakers whose laces had come undone. Her hair was pulled into a low ponytail, and a pencil was tucked behind one ear like she'd forgotten it was there. "You're going to trip over that," Owen said, nodding toward her feet. "I've fallen in 6-inch stilettos on marble stairs," she said, not looking up. "I think I'll survive gravel." "You're not supposed to be working today." "I'm not, I'm assisting." He walked over and leaned in close. "You're directing the foreman." "I call it enthusiastic collaboration." He laughed and reached for her hand. She let him hold it, her fingers curling around his with the kind of ease that still caught him off guard. "I can't believe this is actually happening," he said. Madelyn looked up at the skeleton of the building. "You've earned every inch of it." "But you made it possible." "I just opened a door, you walked through it." They stood there for a moment, the morning wind pushing through the open framework, making the plastic tarps ripple like sails. Then Madelyn's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and her jaw tightened. "What is it?" She hesitated. "My board wants to meet today." "About?" She slipped the phone away. "The partnership. Some of them think it's a conflict of interest, that I'm using company resources on a personal connection." Owen's hand dropped from hers. "Are they wrong?" "No," she said. "They're right, but they're also missing the point. This is more than personal. This is smart business. You're exactly the kind of partner our brand needs." "But I'm not the kind they want." "I'm not backing down." He studied her, the way she held her shoulders, the steel in her gaze. "You realize they could vote to remove you." "I do." "And you're still going in there." Madelyn stepped closer. "I've spent my whole life climbing ladders that weren't built for me. I'm not about to let a few men in tailored suits tell me what I can't do. Not when I've finally found something and someone that matters." He didn't answer. Instead, he reached for her again, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You shouldn't have to fight them alone." "I won't be." That afternoon, Madelyn walked into the Lane and Row boardroom wearing a navy sheath dress and no jewelry, her hair still in the same no-nonsense ponytail from the construction site. Owen sat in the lobby with Grace, who was drawing robots on the back of a company brochure. The meeting stretched longer than expected, almost 2 hours. When she finally emerged, the line of tension in her spine was gone. "They voted to approve the partnership," she said, her voice even. Owen stood, seriously. "With one condition." "Which is?" "I step back from direct involvement. No press appearances, no financial micromanaging. It's yours to lead." His eyes searched hers. "And you're okay with that?" "I'm better than okay. I'm proud." Later that night, they sat on the roof of her building, a blanket beneath them and the city glowing golden around them. Grace was asleep in the guest room below, curled into a pillow twice her size. They shared a bottle of wine and a container of takeout that had gone cold hours ago. Madelyn leaned back on her elbows, looking up at the stars barely visible through the haze. "You know, when I was 15, I made a list of all the things I wanted by 30. Let me guess, private jet, penthouse, global brand." "Close. I wanted to be respected, untouchable. I thought if I built enough walls, no one could hurt me." "And now?" "I want softness. I want messy mornings and burnt toast. I want someone who calls me out when I'm being stubborn and makes me laugh when I'm taking myself too seriously." He reached for her hand. "You want ordinary." "I want real." They sat in silence for a while, the wind tugging strands of hair across her face. Then she turned toward him. "I know this wasn't your world, and I know I've dragged you into boardrooms and galas and meetings you never asked for. Madelyn, but I want you to know I'd give every bit of it up if it meant keeping what we have. I'd walk away from the company tomorrow if it ever came between us. He looked at her, the woman who'd handed him a future without asking for anything in return, who'd let herself cry in his arms after a long day and never flinched at his rough edges, who loved his daughter like she'd always been part of her story. "You won't have to," he said. And then, without ceremony, without flashbulbs or orchestras or a grand audience, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a ring box. She blinked. "What is that?" "I bought it a few weeks ago," he said, voice low. "Kept waiting for the right time. Then I realized there's no perfect moment, just the right person." He opened the box. The ring was simple. No giant stone. Just a thin platinum band with a diamond shaped like a teardrop, set low. "I don't have a yacht, or a surname people whisper in elevators, but I have a daughter who already calls you her best friend. Have a business I want to build with you, and I have every reason in the world to believe we could make something that lasts." Madelyn's throat worked, but no sound came out. "So," he continued, "will you marry me, Madelyn Lane? Not the CEO, not the woman from the fire, just you. The one who makes me feel like I've finally come home." She didn't cry. She laughed, breathless and stunned. Then she kissed him. "Yes," she whispered against his mouth. 1,000 times yes. The wedding was small, not because they couldn't afford more, but because that's what they wanted. Grace wore a flower crown she made herself, and Owen wore a suit that didn't belong to a rental rack. They got married in a garden behind a converted bookstore, with fairy lights strung between the trees and the scent of lilacs in the air. Madelyn walked down the aisle barefoot. She didn't carry a bouquet. She carried grace. After the ceremony, as the sun dipped below the horizon, and the first notes of their song played through the speakers, Owen pulled her close on the makeshift dance floor. "You ever think about the fire?" he asked. "Every day." "Do you wonder what would have happened if I hadn't gone in after you?" She smiled. "I wonder what would have happened if you had, and I'd never found you again." He touched her cheek, the weight of everything they'd built settling around them like a promise. "You would have found me," he said. "You're not the type to let go of something once it matters." "No," she said, "and neither are you." They danced until the candles burned low, until Grace fell asleep in Madelyn's lap, until the stars finally broke through the city haze. And when they left that night, it wasn't to a hotel or a honeymoon suite. It was home. Together. Owen stood in front of the freshly painted glass doors of Keller Automotive, his name etched in matte gold across the top pane. Inside, the lights were on, the lifts polished, the tools lined up like soldiers on the wall racks. The scent of new tires and sawdust still lingered, but it was the scent of ownership now, not labor. He ran a hand over the edge of the front desk, still not entirely believing it was real. The grand opening was less than 24 hours away. He turned as the bell chimed behind him. Madelyn stepped in, carrying a white paper bag and wearing an oversized denim jacket that clearly wasn't hers. "Brought lunch," she said, holding it up. "Though I'm 90% sure the deli guy flirted his way into giving me 5 cookies when I only ordered 2. "I'll allow it," Owen said, taking the bag and setting it aside. "But only because I haven't eaten since sunrise." "Figures," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "You tend to forget food exists when you're in build mode." He gestured around the space. "You think it's ready." Madelyn scanned the room slowly. "It's not just ready, it's perfect. You did this, Owen, not the construction team, not the investors, you." "I didn't exactly do it alone." "You didn't let anyone do it for you either." She stepped closer. "You didn't just build a shop, you built a future, one people can trust. One Grace can grow up seeing as proof that her father never once stopped pushing for better." He looked at her, then down at the floor. "It scares me sometimes, how much it matters now." She reached for his hand. It should matter, it means it's real. They sat on the floor beside the front counter, eating sandwiches out of wax paper and watching the sunlight pour in through the windows. The streets outside were quiet, the world holding its breath in that lull between lunch hour and late afternoon. Owen leaned back on his palms. "You ever think about what's next?" he asked. Madelyn took a bite of her turkey sandwich, chewed thoughtfully, then nodded. "All the time. And I think I'm done trying to climb." He glanced at her. "You, really?" She smiled. "I've spent my whole life proving I belonged in rooms that didn't want me. I think I'm ready to build my own rooms instead. Smaller ones, with better lighting." Sounds like a hell of a blueprint. "I thought so." She turned to face him. "What about you?" He paused. "I want to be the kind of man my daughter doesn't just admire but trusts. I want her to grow up knowing love can be steady, not something that leaves in the middle of the night." Madelyn's expression softened. "You are that man." "Not always, but I'm trying." They sat in silence for a moment, the kind that didn't need to be filled. Then Madelyn reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a key. "What's that?" "The spare key to my apartment," she said. "I thought maybe you'd want it." He looked at it resting in her palm. "You sure?" "I'm sure of you." Owen took the key slowly, curling his fingers around it. "Then I guess I should give you something too." "I already have the garage key," she teased. "Not what I meant." He stood, brushing crumbs from his lap, then reached into the toolbox behind the counter. From the bottom drawer, he pulled out a small wooden box. He took a breath, then opened it. Madelyn froze. Inside was a ring unlike the one he'd proposed with. This one was made of interlocking bands platinum and matte black titanium sleek, understated, and exactly her. "I know we already said yes," Owen said, voice low, "but I never really asked you the way I wanted to. Not with everything clear. Not with your world and mine finally standing on the same ground." She stood slowly, tears already gathering in her eyes. "I want a life with you that's built, not borrowed. One that's loud and quiet and messy and real. I want 1,000 mornings with burnt toast and cold coffee and you in my arms. Will you marry me, Madelyn?" She didn't speak. She just nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks as she reached for him, the ring sliding onto her finger like it had always belonged there. The wedding was held in the courtyard behind Keller Automotive, beneath strings of exposed bulbs and between rows of wildflowers Grace had helped plant in old tires painted white. There were no tuxedos. No press, just people who mattered. Madelyn wore a satin jumpsuit with a plunging back and a smile that nearly knocked Owen off his feet. Grace walked her down the aisle, proudly holding her hand, and whispered loudly to the crowd that this was the best day in history. They exchanged vows under the open sky, surrounded by laughter, clinking glasses, and grease-stained mechanics in borrowed suits. When Owen kissed her, the crowd erupted, and someone popped a bottle of champagne that hit the side of the building and sprayed half the guests. No one cared. It was perfect. Weeks passed, then months. Life didn't slow down, it deepened. Grace moved into a bigger bedroom with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling and a bookshelf Madelyn built herself, despite Owen's doubts about her drill skills. Owen's business grew faster than he could have imagined. 2 new hires, a waitlist that stretched 6 weeks out, and a glowing write-up in a local magazine that called him Queen's quiet powerhouse. Madelyn stepped back from Lane and Rowe, keeping her shares but walking away from the daily grind. She started consulting selectively, on her terms, and used the rest of her time to launch an after-school program for girls interested in leadership and engineering. They made time for slow mornings, for Sunday pancakes, for watching old movies on the couch with Grace between them and popcorn scattered across the floor. They made time for each other. One night, months after the wedding, they sat on the fire escape of their brownstone, a glass of wine in her hand, a mug of tea in his. "Do you miss it?" he asked quietly. She didn't look away from the street below. Miss what? The skyscraper, the boardrooms, the press releases. She turned her head then, not for a second. What do you think your 15-year-old self would say about all this? She'd probably ask where the limo is. He laughed. But after that, Madelyn continued, she'd look at you and Grace and this life we've made, and she'd say, you did it. You finally stopped running. And what would yours say? Owen looked out over the street, then back at her. He'd be shocked I survived. She reached for his hand. But you didn't just survive, Owen, you changed everything. He kissed her knuckles, then her temple, then her cheek. They didn't need fireworks or declarations. They didn't need to prove anything anymore. They had each other. And in the quiet, in the steady rhythm of a life made together, they found something better than magic. They found peace. They found love. And they never let it go.